Well, hello everybody. Welcome to another hour of the Raul Reyes show. I'm glad you're here. Looks like there's about 50 of you on over on the Twitter side, kind of about 3 or 4 on Facebook. More and more Facebook is just sort of down throttling everything that's happening. But does that surprise anybody that Facebook, not so much Twitter, and we're going to explain that here in a little bit, but all the social medias are, they're just throttling every conservative show that's out there. You almost have to have your own platform. We plan on being over on a bunch of different places as well. Let me just put this out here real quick for anybody who's listening right now. Just look, feel free to share. This is our social media accounts. We're going to get on Spotify and all that other good stuff that's coming on board. We'll have our own website here sooner or later as well. It'll be both in English and Spanish. Remember, we're doing an 8 o'clock Spanish show tonight as well. Unless we have technical difficulties, then we'll do something different and wait till next week. But all that said, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here. It's another wonderful Tuesday. Not 8 o'clock. We're doing this at 7 now because we're trying to do the Spanish show at 8. So grab your little share button and fling it out to the rest of the world so they can do that. We're on Twitter as well, as you can see, and of course, we'll get on all the other social media sooner or later. But what a last 7 to 10 days it has been. Let me tell you something. The great state of Texas is waking up to a lot of different things, and one of them is realizing that we have a uniparty system up in Austin that has pretended, I guess, for the last 20 years, because that's how long Republicans have been in charge, that it's been a battle between Democrats and Republicans. And it kind of feels like this right now. He's kind of a cute looking frog, but he's getting boiled. This is kind of what I think we're facing right now, folks. In my long drives, we've got our own business. Sometimes we're 2 hours away, sometimes we're 4 hours away, and I'm not flying anywhere. It's just too short of a distance to fly anywhere, and that's not part of what we do anyway. So, and in my long drives, as I'm thinking about all the things that are happening, this is kind of where things look like we're at. And let me kind of go back to Austin, Texas. For a lot of you who were on your way to Austin, Texas to be a part of the red t shirt, waving, flag waving, support your representatives in the matter that is no Democratic chairs, no Democrats in key committee chair positions because we finally figured out, right? Every year it seems like it's the most conservative. This is what they say: the most conservative session we've ever had. In fact, we had a Senator Creedon, I think is who came out today, said, "Oh, things are lining up beautifully to be another great conservative session." And I think at least the grassroots, the RPT, the Republican Party of Texas, a lot of the folks that work the SREC, which is the State Republican Executive Committee group, large group, by the way. They're not they're the most significant because they put together policy and handed over to Republicans and said, "This is what we want you to do." Well, every year, uh, and every session during the of course when Republicans meet like they did this past year at the convention, they nominate these priorities, and there's a slew of them. I mean, not a ton of them. There's only 8 actually, and all we're asking is pass these 8. Well, everybody who went to Austin this past week were scheduled to be there. I think it was Thursday and or Wednesday, and Dade Phelan put the vote. Actually, he did a lot of maneuvering. I was there both days. And on the floor, there was a lot of maneuvering. Representative Slayton was out there fighting away, trying to get his vote in so that there would be a House vote on whether, you know, Democrats could hold chair positions. And the answer is a lot of Patriots Texans showed up the day after when they were supposed to be there. Well, Dade Phelan moved everything up 24 hours. And so really it didn't fizz out. I was there. You can look at our Facebook and social media pages and you'll see I took some pictures. A lot of wonderful people up in the balcony or the gallery, whatever they call that up there. And you see all the they immediately went into session. Dade Phelan put them into just sort of a pause, and so people walked around and talked, but essentially the you know the Republican base was snookered on that day. And so this is kind of why I put the frog here, because this isn't the only place we're waking up to a reality. Across America, you're starting to see places like in Arizona, where Kerry Lake was supposed to win. Somehow, 5 days of counting renders Katie Hobbs the winner. And think about this scenario. Katie Hobbs is literally responsible for counting votes. You would think she would have recused herself, but she didn't. And she goes through the whole process, and then she ends up the winner, being the governor of Arizona. I mean, and then you look at the media. Of course, they don't cry foul on those things, because they really want you to, you know, what's the big thing right now? Stupid gas stoves. And this is how bad we are right now, I think, psychologically in America. Here's Joe Biden telling you, I think I'm going to do an executive order so you don't use your stoves. Well, who the bleep cares? The guy's not a king. We've sort of have forgotten these things. But if you talk to the younger, generations, the ones that have been indoctrinated since they were in elementary about these things, they're not flinching as much. They're like, I guess we're not using our gas stoves. And oh, by the way, most people have electric now these days. So we're in this conundrum, this horrible place where America is slowly being boiled. And and tonight we're gonna go everywhere, but the theme here is tonight is of course, what are we gonna do about, if we're the frogs being boiled up? What do we do in that process? Now I'm gonna go back to Austin for a second. We're trying to keep Texas red. I mean, Lord knows I've run 2 campaigns and trying to get elected. Um, it's tough to do when they steal elections, but the bottom line is we're in the fight to secure Texas and keep it red. And then you show up like you do 4 or 5 days ago and realize your own Republican Party voted for the guy you knew they knew. Republicans voted for Dave Phelan, knowing that he was going to allow Democrats to be in key chair positions. I mean, does that make any sense? And the way he did it was actually, I'm not even sure it's legal, but they got away with it anyway. And the way it all panned out, essentially, he was saying that, well, we cannot use these monies for politics, and so we have to have Democrat chairs and Republican chairs. Hello, it's a two-party system for a reason, Dade. And so all of it is just sort of this, sleight of hand. And what can patriots do? I think a lot of people were really unhappy with what has happened, and there is a recourse. I mean, and we're going to talk about that here in a little while. But first, in keeping with the America is the frog slowly getting boiled to death. Remember, a lot of folks are meeting in Davos this week. Uh, you know, Klaus Schwab is a trillionaire kind of guy, and he pulls a lot of strings. If you think George Soros has money, that guy has all the money. And they run companies, I think it's like BlackRock or Blackstone, I forget which one it is, but they own everything, essentially, pretty much. And these are big money people that, mingle with guys like Bill Gates. Well, they're in Davos and they're having a conversation about what does it look like in the future? And they have a 2030 plan out there. And I want you to see this video. If I can set it up without getting into the ads. I want you to just kind of, we'll go through this about a minute and a half. Let me set this up. There's a key piece here, and see if you can see it, about what and how the United States will look like when it happens. So let me see if we can share the screen real quick here. And take a look at this here real quick. If you can't hear it, we'll try to turn this up as high as we can, and we'll hide that. Bear with me, folks. All right. Yeah, nobody's talking in that, and that's okay. We don't need them to. Let me see if I can get us back to here. There's 8 predictions that are coming out of the World Economic Forum. That's the WEF or WEF, whichever one you prefer to call it. And this is where like George Soros, Klaus Schwab, and a lot of folks go. Would it surprise you that there are members of the House of Representatives that are Republicans that are also part of this group? Let me give you one example here. Here's Kevin McCarthy. And why is Kevin McCarthy a part of this group? It's really what you got to ask yourself, and you wonder why there's about 20 patriots that were fighting him here about a week and a half now ago. And a lot of it has to do with they see this and then they see the predictions. Now I'm going to go through these because a lot of you were reading through this, but I want to go through a key one here. So the first one was all products will become services. In other words, you're not going to own anything. You're going to rent everything, and if you want food, they'll jet it set it over on a little flying machine, and you'll be more than fine. And so, remember, all of this is to render control. So you're not going to own anything. Is prediction number one. Prediction number two is there is going to be a global price on carbon. It's kind of, well, not kind of. It's exactly what's happening right now with the whole climate change theme, and it's the mechanism to control things. Now, I'll give you a perfect example. Now, this one really bleeps me off all the time, but before they stole my Ford 250 truck, one of the biggest heartburns that I had was that I always had to put in this, I called it cat urine, but essentially it's an exhaust cleaning fluid that you add to it every 5,000 miles, or roughly about that's how fast your truck would sort of suck it all up. And they spray this cat urine, it's urethra or whatever it is, on the muffler, and it's supposed to keep the climate from dooming itself or whatever. And it's but one way that they control the way a guy like me and other people say, "You know what? I don't wanna own a Ford diesel truck." And why? Because it's too much of a hassle. I gotta buy not only diesel, which is very expensive, but now I gotta buy this cat urine to put in the truck, and it's not cheap. Every, you know, 2 gallons or whatever was 25 bucks, and next thing you know, it's really expensive to just drive a truck. You know what I mean? So, all that said, that's number 2, and what they're saying here with there's gonna be a global price on carbon is they're gonna stick it to us. If you wanna fly somewhere, part of it is you're gonna have to, pay a carbon price for flying on an airplane. And that doesn't save the planet. That just controls whether you go to Hawaii or somewhere else or you roam around free. It's a mechanism for control. Number 3, and this is all in the video. I'll put it up on the comment section so you guys can look at it if you want. But number 3, US, this is the one that really, if we go back to the frog and the boiling, that's boiling and dying slowly, this is the one I hope you saw. Number 3, US dominance is over. We have a handful of global powers, and what they're saying is nation states will have staged a comeback. What nation states? And but not doesn't really matter. It's not America, you see. Now, for us Christians, God fearing Americans, this is a no go. So when I put a picture of this guy up there, this dude right here, who is now the House Speaker, do you see why we're concerned? Why is this guy even part of this organization? Why? And let me tell you something. A lot of representatives, not just Republicans, but Democrats, are members of this World Economic Forum. And maybe this is where their bread gets buttered. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We should fire anybody who's part of this organization when number 3, their prediction, and by the way, they're saying prediction, so let me clarify this. So they say these are our predictions for 2030. Well, they're the ones pushing everything so that these predictions come true. You understand? So back to the frog that's slowly boiling, and 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 what happens here? when number 3 prediction of the World Economic Forum for 2030 is that the US dominance will be over. Do you understand why the borders are wide open? Do you understand why there seems to be no rule of law right now? We've got but a handful of sheriffs out there, along the border that are doing wonderful things. I think of guys like Sheriff Bradco down in Kinney County. That guy is doing everything he can by the law, by the Constitution, both the US and the Texas Constitution, to protect the citizens of his county. You scoot over down to Valverde County, my hometown of Del Rio, I haven't heard a bleep from that sheriff. And I know those folks. I'm not here to denigrate them personally. I think they're wonderful people. I grew up with all those folks. But constitutionally, they have no clue, or just they have no intent to defend or secure their counties. Now, it's much broader than that. I wanna show you this picture here. Today, Abbott today, Abbott, during his inauguration, said, "We are going to," or he said that Texas is the only state that is building the wall. And I have to tell you, typically, it probably got a bunch of applause from a bunch of low information people, because this map will tell you, uh, these are the areas that were identified to build the walls, the purple parts, okay? The black lines are natural barriers, so it was always agreed, and DHS down to Border Patrol, US Customized Border Patrol, really. They're the folks who said, "Look, in these areas, we don't need, I mean, there's huge cliffs there, so nobody's gonna climb that, we don't have an issue there." Okay, great. And if you look down there by Brewster County, that's a lot of that is, the Big Bend area, very, very high terrain kind of places. But existing border walls, the 140 miles you see down in red and stars, about the part of Zapata down there, would it surprise you that Abbott, since he said he was going to build the wall, has really only built 1.6 miles? We've been allocated 44.8 miles or something like that, but we only built 1.6, and it's right down there in, Eagle Pass, or what would be Maverick County, right down south of Del Rio. And if you go there, what you're gonna see is, it almost looks like a temporary wall. So back to Davos and their prediction number 3, that the US is not gonna be dominant anymore. And for my political speak, um, homies out there, that means we're no longer a hegemon. We're not gonna be a global power. And how do they do it? Because these are people with big money pushing big ideas through policies, laws, and change them. You just have to look, and we're gonna go to Ukraine in a second, but you have to look at this border and realize, if you're going to get rid of US dominance in the global spectrum, you have to completely change out its layout. And by the way, they test bedded this in England and in France. If you go to England and you go to France, there are places there that no longer look French, and they don't no longer look like the Queensland English, okay? And so this is what I think is part of the process of completely turning the American citizenship, which to me has always been gold. Remember, my dad's from Mexico. He came here legally. We're the American dream. I'm a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel. I have my own business. I have no complaints, except for we're watching the demise. Remember, frog in the boiling water, slowly getting boiled to death. And you look at what happens at the World Economic Forum, their prediction is that the United States is not gonna be dominant, and if they had it their way, we would be subservient back to somebody, uh, probably in Davos. You see, the UN keeps interfering, and people like Joe Biden keep allowing that to happen. This is why we're in a very, bad place, and what I tell folks is, we're at existential times. And for my homies down in Del Rio, that word is, it's a life and death situation. We're either gonna survive or we're not, as the greatest nation that ever thrived, lived, survived for liberty in the entire history of the world. You see? Because We are the greatest experiment, and there's never been anything like America. Again, prediction number 3 for if you're catching on from the World Economic Forum is US dominance will be over by 2030. I'm showing the map here because what I'm saying is this is how they get rid of that dominance. They have to completely make the makeup they have to make over all of America. And how do you do that? The same way they did it in England and in France and other places. You sink the ship in with so many people that have no idea what citizenship really means. Because here's what I'll tell you, and this is not a personal attack on anybody, but there's a lot of young military aged men coming into this country. To me, it is cowardly that you would leave Honduras, El Salvador, Venezuela, Guatemala. I don't care what country you came from. Americans who wanted to separate themselves from the motherland a long time ago sacrificed everything to create 13 colonies that would eventually become America, and they were willing to die for it. That is how you garner a nation, a place to live that's liberty, that's doesn't have the corruption that a lot of those places have. You don't run away from your country. And oh, by the way, for anybody, go ahead and zap me on the comments there. But those are illegal aliens. Congress has never approved this action when the deep state or the administrative state like Mayorkas, who's in charge of DHS, can maneuver policy to allow this to happen under the disguise of asylum, that to me is a problem. And it has been. So again, back to Abbott, he's saying we're the only state that has, building a border wall. Well, you've only built 1.6. And oh, by the way, I don't have it here, but guess who else is part of the World Economic Forum? Greg Abbott. Okay. Now, all my friends over at the Texas Scorecard and True Texas Patriot and all these other places, they love that because Abbott is persona non grata. If you can't take care of Texas, you're out. But here's what I follow up with. Dan Patrick is going to disappoint you too because he's only the most powerful guy in the entire state. And the whole legislative, executive, that guy sits right in the middle because he sits at the executive level as a lieutenant governor, but he's got his hand as the Senate, you know, pro temp number one dude that runs the place. And the way they do this is we have the most conservative session ever by sending all these Senate bills over, knowing that Dade Phelan's going to slap them into places where the ones they don't want to pass is not going to happen. Now, I started this whole process with, or today's hour with, in Austin, a lot of patriots were disappointed. Folks, let me tell you something. My first campaign back against Will Hurd back in we started in 2019 for the 2020 election. It didn't take but that long to realize there's something wrong in Denmark. And that's just a phrase for saying, why don't these Republicans adopt a guy like me? Instead, they ran after some dude they brought in from Austin, which is Tony Gonzalez, and fed him all the money and all the information. And then when I beat him, somebody in Bear County found 1,400 votes in the middle of the night. There's a reason a guy like me didn't win. There's a reason, like, why Joe Kemp, remember that guy? He's the special forces dude up in Washington. There's a reason why Kerry Lake doesn't win. I called it right in this show. I said, Kerry Lake is not supposed to win. They're not going to let her win. They're going to do everything they need to keep her from winning. And do you know why? Because um, she was going to use the Constitution to actually get some things solved. And in the process, would have made a guy like Greg Abbott look terrible because you look at this border, 1.6 miles have been built. And the claim to fame today during his inauguration is we're the only ones that have been building the wall. Sorry, Governor. We're not buying that BS anymore. And for everybody as a follow-up, as I always do, Dan Patrick is about as lieutenant governor as we can get. We need to replace him in the process as well, or else we're going to be in deeper trouble. The lieutenant governor has more power and can push around Dade. Imagine if he looked at Dade Phelan and said, "None of your bills are going to pass if you put the Democrats in chair positions." Has anybody bothered to ask Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick that? Because we should. Other than that, guess what? The people in Davos who are predicting number 3, the prediction is US dominance will be over by 2030. This is how they're doing it right here. And we're playing conservative in the Senate. This is why I ran for the state Senate because I don't have an inkling against a guy like Peter Flores. I think he's a nice man. I think, but he's not going to push any envelopes. And for all of you who like him, this is not personal. It's never been personal. But if you're going to save Texas, you got to start putting in people like Frank Lopez in. You got to get in China Rodriguez if she ever dares to run. We've got a wonderful, wonderful GOP county chair right here in Medina. Julie Clark is fantastic. If I ever run again, by the way, I'm going to grow my hair. It's just you guys are going to see me transition into Sasquatch, I think. And if I ever cut it, that means I'm going to run for something. I mean, we might even primary Tony. I'm not even sure. But for now, we're just going to keep growing the hair. Anyway, I digress. Back to Davos and the World Economic Forum. Guys like Kevin McCarthy and Greg Abbott are members of a organization that predicts, but is really pushing that U.S. dominance will be over by 2030. Folks, you got to fire all those people. If you want a country for your kids or your grandkids and your great grandkids, you need to fire them. Let me tell you how else they're going to become. They're going to get to a point where they make us not dominant. $33 trillion in debt. That's horrible, and it's going to get even worse because we just passed $1.7 trillion of gunk we can't pay for. And you can thank Mitch McConnell. And you can thank Kevin McCarthy. They went over him like a speed bump. Doo-doo. That was it. This is why guys like me are saying, you're going to have to change this. Okay. You can hate me. You can call me a bomb thrower. You can look at me and go, Raul, you're never going to get elected again. That's fine. But you're going to lose the country in the process because you're not listening anymore. And you can't just go run around voting for the R. Because here's what's going to happen in this district down here in the South. Tony Gonzalez is going to say how much he loves Donald Trump again, and he's a Republican. Oh, by the way, he moved his office out of the Endeavors facilities in Des Zavala. He's over on 1604 for anybody who wants to know. Go pay him a visit and find out why that guy doesn't support the rules that the 20 Patriots went for. And oh, by the way, this I'm not sure what the change was, but about 2 months ago, he was saying, we've got to impeach Mayorkas, impeach Mayorkas. It's on record. And then he turns around and says, I don't think I'm in for impeaching Mayorkas. Again, how does this happen? That guy went to Ukraine before Ukraine fell into a war with Russia. Why would the representative of CD23 be in Ukraine? These are the things you have to start to ask yourself. Moving on to prediction number 4. Farewell hospitals, hello home hospital. All this is they're looking at technology, and to me, this is sort of the where we find ourselves now with these vaccines and the push. To me, I think it's the greatest, the most horrible actually, and greatest I mean by large scale here. But I think it's the most horrible experiment that they conducted during COVID with all these vaccines. I'm not a doctor. You can write it down. It's a disclaimer, but I'm telling you is there's way too many young athletes that are passing out and dying. Uh, the most, I guess, visual one was Daimler over football player took a hit to the chest and then fell over. Luckily, after 9 minutes of CPR and a whole lot of work at the hospital, he is up and moving around at least. But soccer players, football players, all kinds of athletes. Now, those are the ones that are just popping out. But so when you look at number 4, when they're talking about technology and say farewell to hospitals, these are people that they think they can print organs and hand them over to you. You see, and to me, you get into a lot of these, and this is not what we're here for. We're here to worship and praise God Almighty, the one and only, not to replace Him. The last time this happened, brimstone and fire rained down on a whole lot of people and destroyed them. I'm not for that, folks. And so that's prediction number 4. And number 5, my farmer and rancher friends are really going to like this one. We are eating much less meat. I don't know about you guys, but here in San Antonio, one of my favorite restaurants, and I'm gonna plug them. Hopefully, they're listening and they'll sponsor the Raul Reyes show. But Chama Gaucha is amazing. They have the best, oh, just the best steak ever, and chimichurri, we put some of that on there. I'm not gonna stop eating cows. I'm gonna tell you right now. I don't know who these people are talking to, but, we are eating much less meat. uh, it's not a good way to go. In fact, for a lot of you, nutritionists, and and let me rephrase that so it doesn't sound like a spike, but for a lot of you folks who like to eat well and look at, what you're consuming, what you've realized is that processed foods are bad for you. They spike your sugars, and we are seeing large amounts of diabetes and limbs being cut off and dialysis and all this other stuff that results of us eating really unhealthy for the last 30, 40 years. Hey man, I like McDonald's too, but it's some of the most processed foods that you can possibly eat. So in moderation, you're fine. And again, I'm not a doctor. What I'm saying to you is the World Economic Forum is predicting we're going to eat a lot less meat when in reality, good protein like meat, eggs, milk, cheese. I'm gonna go back to cooking with lard. I remember my grandmother, for all my Hispanic friends out there, and your grandmother, we would, you know, slaughter a pig or 2 during Christmas, excuse me, and then we would do this, fry the skin up, chicharrones is what we call them. And then once we scooped all the pork rinds out, you'd have about, that much of grease in those big black kettles, and grandma would go in there and put it in I remember it's funny, but she would put it in one of those coffee cups, and sometimes she put it in one of those, is it bugler, the cigarettes they used to roll up, and grandpa used to smoke those or chew tobacco or something. Anyway, she'd put it in there, so when she throws some beans out there, she'd slap I'm talking a big scoop, honkering lard. Those people lived to be 85 and 87 respectively, and they smoked to boot. But we're chunking down processed food, and these idiots are telling us we're going to eat a lot less meat. Let me just tell you something. God put the animals and the land here so that we could feed ourselves and be a part of that. I think this is a bunch of hogwash, but again, it goes back to controlling things. And if you look at what's happening out there with inflation, there is soon to be a large shortage of food. I think a lot of this is very purposeful, and somebody's up to no good, again. But when you look at this organization, the World Economic Forum, and they're saying that we're not going to dominate as a country, I have a big problem with that. I served 22 years to keep this nation at tip top shape as best as I could doing my job. And for anybody to come tell me that, and if your representative is a part of that organization, I'm going to tell you something. You need to fire him in 2024 or her. But I want to show you this video here. Let me see if we can bring it up here in about 2 seconds. I want you to listen to this one here. I'm going to share because we're going to go through, finish the predictions, because this goes back to the map I showed you about Texas being invaded and the nation, really. By the way, if you're like in North Dallas or Minnesota or wherever you're at, down here in Del Rio and Eagle Pass, it's not like we're not seeing the car chases, and it's not like we don't see that impact, but it's normal operating procedures here. We go to work. Occasionally, we'll see a car chase, and we'll see the buses, but the buses really show up early in the morning. So, what am I trying to tell you? They've made it very clinical that even the border is starting to not complain as much. You see, the part where 18,000 Dominicans are sitting under the bridge of Del Rio International Bridge between there and the Ciudad Acuña, that was bad, bad visuals. You see, so they cleaned it up, and so the rest of you, you're starting to feel what we felt in the beginning. So if you're up in New York or Los Angeles or some of these big cities, you're now complaining that you have a lot of illegal aliens in your neighborhoods. Well, yeah, they're not staying in Del Rio, Texas. They're not staying in Eagle Pass. We don't have any jobs here, folks. Okay. For as much as Greg Abbott touts the Texas economy, he has failed South Texas. That's it. And oh, by the way, as I always follow up, Dan Patrick is just to blame. He's only the most powerful guy in all of Austin. So he's either incompetent or just sort of sitting back and going to be governor one day. I think he's going to make a horrible governor, but let's just leave that on. Let me show you this because I think this, let me set this up. What I'm going to show you is Representative Salazar. She is from Miami, or that she's a representative of Congress for Florida, housed specifically in the area of Miami. And if you remember, Miami was blue, and it has since Ron DeSantis gone red. Well, this is one of the things, or one of the successes is that we have a Republican, actually two of them from the Miami-Dade area. Representative Salazar, I'm about to show her you what she's about to say here in a bit, but she is a Republican. Now, last note, the mayor of Miami is also a Republican, but he's pro amnesty and just about anything that Democrats would throw out there. So we're starting to see the conundrum of a Republican that feels and sounds and does a lot of the things that Democrats do. Let me show you this one. I'm going to share this real quick. Let's bring her here and listen to this one. Hopefully, it's loud enough. Let me see. Make sure I got the. Where are you? All right. Here we go. The immigration system, because not only we need those hands, like the Congress, like the senator was saying, but we need to also give dignity to those people who are in the country, and those are the people that I represent. We're talking about 13, 15 million people who are most of them Hispanics. I would say 85%. If my language look like me and sound like me, that are contributing with the economy of this country, and they live in the shadows. So it's time to seal the border, like she said, put order, let see who comes in and who doesn't, and then turn around and give dignity. That doesn't mean path to citizenship. That means to include them and make them dignified members of our community. Thank you. Well, let me tell you something. And Tucker Carlson had Representative or Congresswoman Maria Salazar. That's her name. Okay, and he challenged her because she said the same thing. Actually, she wrote it down in an op-ed. Let's give these people dignity. And by the way, I knew about this lady the very moment I saw her with Tony Gonzalez and her other counter representative. I forget what his name, out of Miami Dade area, newly elected Republicans, and guess where they're at? They're down in Del Rio with Tony Gonzalez, and they're all espousing about securing the border and all this other stuff. Well, the three of them, to include Tony Gonzalez, are all about pro amnesty. You see, and they hang out with a group called the Texas Libre Initiative, and these people tout these very conservative ideas, but it all leads to dignity and, of course, amnesty for illegals. Now, Maria said something here at the very end, says, no, we're not talking for a pathway to citizenship, but she is, because at the end of the day, she's written various articles about giving citizenship after a set period of time. I get it. She says they're here for years without paying taxes. Well, they shouldn't be here at all, Maria. Period. In the story. Now, let me say this: Cuban Americans, which mostly reside, I guess, on the East Coast, and by the way, they're everywhere. So I'm not making assumptions here. What I'm saying is the assumption, as part of it, if you were to make an assumption, I guess, is a lot of Cuban Americans live in the Miami or the Florida area. Well, more Mexican Americans live in Texas and, of course, in California. The views are different because of where they come from. You see, if you're in the East Coast and you're of Latino or Hispanic descent, you really are fighting socialism. So the fact that Maria here is talking about amnesty or a pathway to citizenship, which sort of she says no, but really she is, because we have it written down somewhere, should tell you everything. Now, I want you to look at this. What the video I showed you was real simple. Let me share this back here. Where is Congresswoman Salazar at in this picture? At the World Economic Forum. So, again, back to, boiling waters here, right? You know, we're the frog right now. Our own Republicans are going to places like Davos to seek help for ensuring that this border right here never gets really secure, and if it does, we're gonna inundate it a whole lot like they did France and England. because those people don't know what their country looked like anymore. Their heritage has been obliterated by immigration after immigration after immigration. In our case, it's illegal immigration, and I always go back to the young males that are coming in from places like San Salvador and Guatemala. I'm like, my question is, and I would ask it in Spanish: why aren't you staying in your own country to fight for the freedoms that you're looking for in this country? And the answer is they probably don't know how. Doesn't I don't know. The answer is whatever it is they're going to answer. But for us here, the middle incomers, that would be me, that would be you, the bulk of us, we're going to get crushed. If you give amnesty to all the people that are here illegally, we're going to get crushed because it essentially takes anybody like me who's made a way forward post my father who came from Mexico, the American dream, remember? It then puts future generations on my end at risk from even getting to the middle income because guess what? There's so many illegal aliens that are now citizens or they would be citizens, no skill set. They're probably going to have to live off some kind of welfare. That's already happening now, folks, and they're draining all the resources. So, guys like me, folks like you, are going to have to go pay your taxes to help these folks literally just stay afloat. And for what? Cheap labor? At some point here, it's no longer about just about cheap labor. It's about transforming America like they're doing the rest of the world because guess what? They don't want US dominance in 20 by 2030. So for anybody who says, well, they're just, big city slickers, big companies want they want cheap labor. Yeah, that's part of it. But the reason number one is they need to remake the citizenry of America to make it look so different that we no longer want to fight wars anywhere else or defend anything anywhere else. There's not to be a right or wrong anymore. It's just going to be one of these we exist. And America used to be a number one hegemon or a world dominant power, and it no longer is. That's kind of where we're at, folks. Let me keep moving here. Let's go to number 7. I'm gonna skip over number 6 because it's not even relevant. But number 7, the values that built the West will have been tested to a breaking point. This kinda goes back to America won't exist as the dominant anymore, and why? Because all of our Western ideals and values are being tested right now. They wanna make God irrelevant in this country. Have you figured that one out yet? Because that they just do. You see, when you stop worshiping God Almighty, and then look fighting for freedoms to be able to go to church, to take your families to pray in groups, to do what you want to do, something they cannot do in Russia or any some of these other places like China, then you've been enslaved by your government. That's essentially it. Now let me take a quick time out there and segue here to Russia and why did we end up in Ukraine in what now looks like a proxy war? And this all fits in with they're boiling the frog slowly because the people in Davos in number 4 or number 3, the prediction is there's going to be a couple of countries that are really going to dominate, but really they're kind of coordinating things. And they're talking about the UN. Now, if you're these people, there's a few things that are in your way of world dominance or control or a one global nation process. One of them is America. And this is why they've got to get rid of world dominance of the United States as it sits right now. Our military has been crippled. It's weak. It's into woke. They're attacking it for that very reason. The border, as I see, if we look at this right now, this is why they want to invade people. Then to come here, and we're under an invasion. It's really what it is. Ukraine is so insignificant 5 6 years ago, but America made it more significant through a lot of different things that led us to now a proxy war with Russia. Now, let me go back to the question. How do very elitist, rich globalist people, Davos people, Klaus Schwab, Soros, those kinds of people, how do they control the world? Well, they have to get rid of certain things. One of them is guns in America. They have to get rid of liberty in America. And when they can't do that, they flood it with a whole different people that essentially can be controlled. Because that's really what's going to happen. These people are going to vote or do things according to whoever their slave masters are. If you think they come here just to live the American dream, they owe somebody money for bringing them to this country, folks. Just don't doubt me. Just bet on that. So so they're on their way to destroy America through all this wokeism. The military is into wokeism. You look at what happened to FBI, CIA. They've been in our business for all of us who have tried to talk about Russian collusion was fake. The COVID pandemic was politicized. All these things, and social media has been in bed with our own government to tamper it down to a point where we literally had one of the best presidents we've ever had lose an election overnight for the most part. Joe Kemp, another I mentioned him earlier. Raul Reyes, Carrie Lake, all these wonderful people that love America coincidentally have lost all their elections. How can that possibly be? And here's Ukraine and Russia now. Let's go there. I believe that the reason we're in Ukraine is because elitists need to get rid of someone like even Putin. Now, I'm not here to defend Putin. What I'm saying to you is the reason you propagate that Ukraine is ever so muchly needed or an interest of the United States, which it never was, by the way. It's never been a national interest to be in Ukraine. Absolutely zero. We don't care about Ukraine. But all of a sudden, we're there. Well, Putin is Putin, even though he controls all of his people, is uncontrollable by the elitist globalists of this world. Do you understand? And they can't have that. For the same reasons we want our liberties and he wants control of Russia are the same reasons that they've got to get rid of America as the world dominance and Russia because they can't control someone like Putin. Now, here's what I think they've created a mess. It's obvious. But old Putin is running over to Xi Jinping over in China, and guess what's gonna happen? Those 2 are gonna align themselves, and because if they think they can control China, they've got another thing coming. China wants world dominance, and I'm not saying China may be on the backside of all this, but Klaus Schwab is not a guy that deals with I mean, they deal with China, but they're not gonna be able to control China either. So all we've done is put ourselves on a journey created a mess where China and Russia get together and all hell breaks loose. Potentially, while we are weakened because we've been invaded at our borders, our military is a complete mess. If Donald Trump spent a lot of money to bolster it, the wokeism is remember uh, General whatever Finney or whatever his name is put more interest in the woke theories that need to be integrated into the training of officers and enlisted men and women than he did on how to defend the nation and why, because it's all part of weakening the military from the inside. It's everywhere. Indoctrination of our kids, same thing happening uh, across the school. The good news is the mama bears is spot. They've risen, they've awakened, and they're fighting back. Here in Texas, the Republican Party base is awakened. I hope they fight back. I know that they are. Matt Rinaldi, I really like Matt Rinaldi. We're going to try to get him on the show here. Hoping to get another guy, Wade Mill, good on policy. He used to work for Chip Roy. We're trying to get him on board here. Another Pedro Gonzalez, who's just a phenomenal, um, just discerner of what's happening out there. We're trying to get him on here. We'll eventually work on that. But back to the World Economic Forum. Those are the predictions, folks. And they've got this last one here. I'm just read this one here. By the 2030s, we'll be ready to move humans toward the red planet. Have at it. Go to, in fact, let's put every liberal in one of these Elon Musk rockets and just blast them into Mars. You can have Mars, keep Mars, whatever you want to do. 2050, 2070, we may not be around for that. But if that happens, have at it. All I'm saying is and let's put every liberal and send them to Mars if that's really what they want to do, because that's their predictions. But when number three is U.S. dominance of the world is not no longer going to be, I have a big problem with that because we have always been the shining city on the hill. We've been the beacon for a lot of people. Why do you think they want to come here? The problem I have is everybody who comes here is not going to be assimilated like you're supposed to, and fighting for this country isn't as important when you're used to running away from problems in places like El Salvador, Guatemala, or the Congo, or wherever you're coming from. Doesn't matter. This isn't personal. What this is we are a nation of laws, and the fact that you're coming here running away from something cowardly, not defending yourself, where else do we go? Where else do we go? I said this on my Spanish show the last time around. Listen, like I said, you're coming to this country, you better be willing to die for it against the left or anybody who's pretending to be on the right, because that's really what we have. You just have to look at Austin, Texas 3 or 4 days ago. A lot of people finally said Republicans really aren't conservative. Duh. We've been saying that for a while. So, uh, last note here as we start to wrap it up and set it up. Hopefully, if we're not at 8 o'clock, we had technical difficulties. We're trying to get some new stuff on board. If it doesn't work, we'll see you next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. But as a wrap up, what I would say is this: look, a lot of things are brewing that makes it look like and feel like this is us. And the beauty about this country is that there's always been smart men and women who figure out how to come back from this scenario. And you saw it with a guy named Chip Roy, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, and 17 others who joined those three to fight this guy right here from becoming the Speaker of the House. Now he's in, but he's been handcuffed so much to the point where it's a good thing. It's a positive thing. And for anybody who realized, hey, Democrats are the problem, but looks like Republicans are too. Would it surprise you that we also have a few people that are on the media side that really they're not on our side either. Let me see if I can find this last video here because, and I'm probably not going to be able to do it, but let me look here real quick. Give me a second here, folks. Sorry about that. I have that one. I have that one. We're not going to find it. Louder with Crowder put out a video about a minute and a half long. I think today, guy's almost in tears, and he's talking about how a lot of his Republican conservative media cohorts. He woke up and realized after this, big spill over the speaker this past week, they really weren't working for conservative values. They weren't working against the big bad media, the fake media, against the government. And he's almost in tears. Well, we've been saying that for a long time. And if you know a guy like Frank Lopez and Manny Rodriguez, Bianca Gracia, and Myra down there in Laredo, Rolando, but I can name them all. We've all realized something, and that is not everybody is who they say they are. I told you last time around, I'm really disappointed in a guy named Mark Levin. I can't believe, Mr. Constitution doesn't understand that part of the process is a tug of war between even within our own tent to not allow to move things as they are, because guess what? We're going down like lemons right over the cliff, and we have to make changes. And so, Louder with Crowder is part of the Blaze TV network system. Guy's almost in tears. I wish I had it. I can't show it, but bottom line is we've been saying that for a long time too. I no longer listen to Fox News. About the only one that I really like on there is Tucker Carlson. But find alternatives. This is one of them. We'll show you. We'll try to give you as much in depth without really wrecking the whole evening with too much information. And because I speak a little homey, I mean, I'll throw a little essay here and there, and we'll have some fun in the process. Okay, but the reality is, we are. we're not in a good place in America. We're not in a good place in Texas. And for all of you who are finally waking up and realizing, uh, Steve Bannon had Wade Miller on there, and they said they're about to put Democrats in key chair positions, and that's like really uh, Kevin McCarthy looking at AOC or Ilhan Omar and all the squad and saying, "Hey, guess what? We're going to let you run the show in these committees." Why would you do that? Because you're not who you say you are. So all that said, let me wrap it up with this. There is always hope. Smart Americans and just willing to fight Americans are gonna keep fighting. So all the Republican Party base that went out there and was disappointed, don't give up. Get with Matt Rinaldi, get the SREC to meet. It's going to take you 18 months or so, but get rules package and pass these and watch them come into the SREC to try to take over because that's really what's going to happen is that they insurge to try to keep you from doing those things. But you have to pass the central rule in Texas that says if you get censured, you're no longer going to run as a Republican Party. And why? Because we are a entity of ourselves. The Republican ticket, the title, is only given to people who meet the planks. When you don't meet those, guess what? You're out of here. Until we do that and grow a backbone, we're not going to be able to save Texas or the nation. Because look at this. I'm telling you right now, 1.7 miles of this entire border was built, and our governor thinks that's okay. Dan Patrick, you won't scathe even after I said that because unless you open your mouth and push your power around, not just to put people like me not in the Senate to question everything you're doing, but to actually do something about this mess here, then you'll start to earn our respect. Until then, you're wasting our time. All that said, it's been a great 1 hour. I rambled on and on, but the key thing is here we're boiling in hot water. We can stop it. We're going to have to stop it if we're going to save this country for our kids. But we're going to have to push up on Abbott and Dan Patrick to seal this border. We're going to have to push on Kevin McCarthy. Thank God for Chip Roy. God bless Chip Roy, Matt Gaetz, and all those people who stood up. They were hated up until people realized the goodness that came out of doing business that way. And it, guess what? It showed some true colors on some people like Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, and all these other people. And but stay alert, stay awake, and discern the things that are happening. Or get to the show at 7 o'clock. We'll show you what we know every week as best we do. And until next week, you guys have yourself a wonderful and good night. God bless, and we will see you next time around.